Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen icy incantations, melancholic motherhood, and a mustachioed news editor that doesn't want pictures of Spider Man. But we're going to kick things off this week with Black Cloak number 8, written by Kelly Thompson with artwork by Meredith McLaren. This issue really drives home the consequences for our main character on what she put into play within the first story arc of Black Cloak. She's really starting to see the interactions and the consequences of what's happened with each and every character, with the landscape, with her own duties as a Black Cloak, as she's now been reinstated within that brotherhood of detectives. I love what Meredith McLaren is doing here, as I feel like as an artist, she's really kind of taken another step here, as the artwork has kind of remained within the same style that she had previously. However, I feel like the compositions that she's choosing and the angles that she's choosing to tell the story have really kind of grown, and it's made the storytelling itself so much more appealing. The other part, the narration of the story, is super enticing as well, as we're kind of seeped in mythology as we're living in this land of fairies and mermaids and so on and so forth, right? But it also takes the time to explore the notion that mythology is still ever existent, even in a mystical, magical world like this. There's still mysteries to unravel, and there's still things that we in this society know don't exist, and they in their society also don't believe to exist, but also maybe they kind of do. Anyway, I kind of loved what they did with this issue, and Black Cloak, I feel like, has grown from arc to arc, and I can't wait to see how they continue to grow. And with our next issue, let's talk Conan the Barbarian number 15, written by Jim Zub with artwork by Doug Braithwaite. So this is the first time that we've really had the opportunity to see Jim Zub play within one of the stories that we've been told a multitude of different times here within the mythos of Conan the Barbarian. We're kind of dealing with the Frost Giant's daughter, and that story has been told by writers like Kurt Busiek, Roy Thomas, and even obviously Robert E. Howard. But I like that Jim Zub is really taking his own approach, and it's not necessarily a retelling of the story. He's not playing the hits, but he's really kind of looking at it from a wider scope, and we're getting a little bit more at the back end, we're getting a little bit more at the front end here, and it's really making the story breathe a little bit more so than it did previously. Doug Braithwaite, also, his artwork is just so fine-tuned, and it's so beautiful and yet so brutal at the same time. The battle scenes that take place at the front end of this issue are absolutely bloody and gruesome. However, there's beauty to what is being drawn in the pages of this book as well, which is clear when we're dealing with the Frost Giant's daughter. The whole point is that she's alluring, Conan. She's drawing him in with her figure. Doug Braithwaite, the way that he puts that into play is truly masterful. The other thing is that with the previous issue drawing into this issue as well, we're all kind of like in the perspective of the Frost Giant's daughter. And I love that when we're looking through that lens, the writing that Jim Zub has in place, it's almost rhythmic, it's almost musical, the way that the pages read from narration to narration. So overall, this was a completely masterful issue. I loved seeing something familiar from Conan, albeit something truly new because of what Jim Zub and Doug Braithwaite are doing. Next up, let's talk Daredevil, The Woman Without Fear number 3, written by Erica Schultz with artwork by Michael Dowling. If I'm being honest, this had the feeling of a little bit of a filler issue, and when we're dealing with a mini-series, that could be detrimental. However, I feel like there was a lot of positives with this issue as well. So we're still dealing with Elektra as Daredevil, looking for Alice, her ward that she picked up during the Zdarsky run. And she's had run-ins with the new Punisher, and now she's been in Madripoor. And it's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of action that's taken place here. It's been very comic booky in the best possible way. Nothing has been overwrought with silliness, but it's been fun as well. Now, Michael Dowling, I think, is really one of the artists that has really caught my eye recently, as Daredevil kind of has a feel to the book, right? It should be gritty, it should be textured, right? It's nothing's cartoony about this. And he brings the same appeal that artists like Alex Maleev and Michael Lark had done in the past. Now, there are certain parts of this issue, specifically when we're looking through Alice's eyes, where the artist changes, and those pages kind of draw me out, but they don't draw me out enough to not enjoy the overall issue here. I really like what Erica Schultz is doing. I think she's telling a fun, compelling story, and I'll be honest, when a mini series is doing better than the main series itself, that's very telling. So, Marvel, maybe keep your eye open. Maybe it's time to give Schultz an ongoing here. Could be time. Anyway, Daredevil the Woman Without Fear is a super entertaining issue. And with our next issue, we have Detective Comics 1089, written by Ram V with artwork by Guillaume March. So this is the grandiose operatic ending to the arc that Ram V has put into place. And I gotta say, I feel like he did a really good job putting the bow on the package. This is gonna in turn be one of those stories that we recommend to readers over and over and over as time goes on, as one of the stories that is truly telling of the Batman mythos. Ramvi really did some interesting things as he kind of truly brought Bruce down from on high, drug him to hell, only to rise him back up to be the person, the vision that Gotham needs. The other thing that he did really well in this is he's working with a lot of ancillary characters, and the Bat family is already enormous, but he did a really good job of balancing the characters that were really truly needed in this story, and it wasn't the people that you would expect, as they really focused truly on people like Selina, people like Victor Fries, and even people like Two-Face here, but more in a heroic role, or at least a more nuanced role. He did a really fantastic job. And the other thing about this issue too is that I think the most effective part of the story was an interlude that was written by Dan Waters with artwork by Christopher Mitten, where it really did focus on Victor Fries and Two-Face reflecting on what had just occurred and how they played a part in not the downfall of Gotham, but the saving of Gotham. Really cool way to kind of look at those characters and reinterpretize kind of who they mean to Batman and who they mean to Gotham as a whole. Anyway, fantastic stuff that's happening here. I'm really sad to see Ram V go, but I have to say the entire breadth of the saga that he has written in Detective Comics is totally worthwhile. All right, let's talk Dick Tracy number 5, written by Michael Morisi and Alex Segura with artwork by Geraldo Borges. Dick Tracy has been okay. Overall, this feels kind of like the ending of our introductory arc to Dick Tracy in this new Mad Cave universe, and I think it's been pretty effective so far. Michael Morisi and Alex Segura have crafted a story that's really walked a razor's edge as they've really tried to keep it adult and gritty, more gritty than we've seen in the past, but also not losing all of the camp that we've had, knowing that this is a Dick Tracy serialized news strip character. They've done pretty good with that. The downside, I feel like, is the artwork has been wishy-washy. It's been okay. What I've liked is that the way that they characterize these people, I think that everyone kind of has a visual style and everyone is fitting and everything makes sense in the universe, but the stylistic choices, specifically with digital halftone and sometimes with thicker inks that are needed, it feels a little bit, I don't know, it just feels out of place basically. And the fact that the colors are a little bit muted and a little bit muddier doesn't help any of the other artistic choices here overall. Tweaks can happen here and it can definitely get better, but when you think Dick Tracy and muted colors, those two things shouldn't mesh. That yellow trench coat is iconic. Let it pop. But overall, this was a really satisfying issue as we've kind of gotten Dick Tracy back to where he needs to be. He understands the villain of the story now. He knows that everything isn't going to be as easy as right and wrong. There's nuance to all of the heroes and villains, and he knows his place and his role within that storyline. So it's been super entertaining. I'm curious to see how this kind of continues and grows. It's one of those books that I kind of teeter-totter back and forth on here. But again, as an introductory arc, I think that this kind of did the trick. All right, next up, let's talk Kaya number 21, written and drawn by Wes Craig. So this issue really starts diving into the mythology of the Kaya universe and kind of the mysteries behind some of the things that happened and kind of some of the articles that some of our main characters have, specifically Kaya's metal arm. I love that they're kind of deepening the connection or pulling the connections apart between some of our main characters as they're kind of walking down different paths at this point in their lives, as Kaya is totally mistrusting of everyone and anything, with her prime directive really being protect Jin at all costs, where Jin wants to call in the help of anyone that is willing to offer, even though maybe the offer that's being given isn't necessarily as forthcoming as it should be. They're playing with other things here too, where Jin, the nature of Jin is really being called into question as to how he gained his magical abilities and possibly maybe even his lineage overall. So the mythology again of Kaya is really growing and expanding in such a wonderful way. With each arc, we've kind of been introduced to a new land and a new set of characters. And well, now this is taking that and really just kind of inflating the balloon, if you will. It's making everything just feel bigger and get bigger as time goes on. And it feels like we're on this doomed path right towards that future vision that we had in one of those in-between issues of the arcs where Kaya was completely separated from Jin. She had her own band of pirates, and yeah, it feels like we're getting really, really close to that being a reality. So overall, again, Kaya is a fantastic adventure series. I love it. It's great for any age reader, and I think it's going to be perfect if you decide to pick it up. All right, let's talk Phoenix number 3, written by Stephanie Phillips with artwork by Alessandro Miracolo. I really love that this series has allowed Jean to really grow as a character, as we've gotten to see her really play with the subset of her powers and really kind of what that power means, both in the ways that she utilizes telekinesis and the breadth at which she can use that, along with the Phoenix Force itself. It's kind of no holds barred, as every time that she's been with the X-Men and on Earth, she has to be handcuffed herself because this is the same entity that destroyed an entire planet. Well, being a cosmic entity and being in space and taking on worthwhile threats up to her power level, it means that she can kind of go all out. And I love that Stephanie Phillips is really exploring that idea and really not handcuffing her in the same way that maybe you would need to on a team such as the X-Men. Now, Alessandro, in the same vein, is conveying that power set really majestically. With a being of fire, it's got to be a lot of fun crafting these pages, and it kind of shows on each and every page flip, as like you could tell, like everything feels kinetic and everything feels flowing. It's almost like watching the steam come off of asphalt on a hot day. You just kind of feel the pages moving as Jean takes on the Phoenix Force, and you see the fiery entity just kind of like, beholden upon all of the villains. Let's talk about villains on that same vein here too, because in the same way that Jean is able to use her powers in these ways, the villains are up to task as well. In this issue, she's taking on the entire Black Order itself here, the heralds of Thanos himself. And that should not be a light task, but it's something that the Phoenix is definitely up to. So again, I love that they're taking Jean and really not leveling her up, but allowing her to show the true majesty of what it is to be Jean Grey and to be the Phoenix. All right, let's talk Saga number 69, written by Brian K. Vaughan with artwork by Fiona Staples. I've been what could be perceived as harsh about Saga for the last couple issues, and I think what's happening is that Saga has been so good for so long that to reach those high levels, it's almost insurmountable issue by issue. You can't really do that. Also, the expectation is so high that you can't keep building on that kind of expectation over and over and over either. But what's happened though is I feel like Brian K. Vaughan has done a good job at setting us up for an issue like this, because this was truly heartbreaking. I've been really critical about Alana as a character, and I think rightfully so, as Alana is a very nuanced character that's had her struggles and had bouts of tragedy over and over and over. But when it comes to parenthood and specifically motherhood, you can't really take those and lean on them, as she has responsibilities and she has Hazel and Squire to care for, and she has to do right by them. And that was the thing that really hurt me in previous issues, as I'm sitting here questioning, come on, like, let's not repeat the same mistakes of the past. And this really opened my eyes, as it's an issue that we get to spend with Alana, where she gets to kind of explain what's going on in her head and what her connection is to her children, specifically Squire, and how just having them around and their presence has totally changed her as a character, and that what she does isn't always what's in her mind either. I loved this character development. I loved the growth that we were shown in this. The thing is, when we get these in Saga, we know that tragedy is right around the corner. So this was such a fantastic, wonderful issue to perceive. It's going to be so much more heartbreaking as we continue to see what continues to happen here, because our characters definitely are on a road where change is afoot, basically. I'm excited to see what that means, though. Overall, though, Saga continues to be fantastic. It continues to be a character piece that is one of the best in comics through and through. All right, let's talk Spectregraph number 3, written by James Tynion with artwork by Christian Ward. So, the story of the world's worst mother continues as we are still with our main characters, the realtor and the person who was working for the individual who wants to kind of investigate how to turn someone into ghosts in this mansion. They've both been turned into these ghosts, per se, and it's been an issue really of bickering and fighting and getting to know each other and then lifting each other up when it's needed. And I would love something like that if I had care for these individuals. And I see that Tynion is trying to do that because there's a lot of cool things that he does with this issue when he's kind of comparing what it feels like to be an echo of an individual and an echo of a human being, right? Whether it's like how you feel about yourself or how others perceive you, and kind of being an echo of truly a human being, as these people are now ghosts, and they can't really work within the realm of the living. So it was an interesting notion. I like that he kind of wove that in, but it either needed to be explored more or maybe needed to be explored earlier, because I just kind of don't have a level of care for what happens to these characters. It's very interesting, but it's not anything that I think is risky, right? I don't feel for these characters and what's happening to them. I don't have a level of care for them. Christian Ward continues to deliver, though. So when I talk about the echoes, I really like how he's really laying out some of the ghostly apparitions within this mansion. There's scenes in here that are like almost like visuals right out of the movie The Cell, where there's like slices of the ghost as different portions of them are laid out and kind of moving independently, but also all at the same time as they try to attack these two protagonists. Really great visuals. I think it's the thing that's kind of kept me tied into the book because it's really wonderful to read, especially in the magazine format. But is it enough to kind of make me continue the journey? I don't know. Time will tell. We'll see on this one. Overall, again, it's an okay issue. If you're going to pick it up, though, I think it's going to be worthwhile for Christian's artwork alone. Next up, let's talk Standstill number 2, written by Lee Lowridge with artwork by Andrew Robinson. So let's get this right out front here. Lee and Andrew are like in full force here, artistically and narratively, as everything, all of the tricks in the tool bag here are being put forth. The color choices in this book are absolutely pitch perfect and stunning. The use of things like halftone, speed lines, blur effects, totally on point here. And the artistic choices here, you can tell that Lee Lowridge is writing this for an artist to be kind of put on display, as there's not just a splash page, not a double splash page, but a quadruple splash page that's being put forth here. And it is awesome to see. We don't get to see Andrew Robinson's artwork all that often in the pages of comics. So when you get a chance, do this, put it on display, because this was awesome. It's an exciting, entertaining, kinetic like issue. I love how they're conveying all of the things that are happening. Now, narratively, we're kind of starting to unravel some of the notions of these characters' motivations, right? We're starting to see that maybe the protagonist that we thought we had in issue 1 isn't necessarily the protagonist, and maybe he might be something totally different. And we're also getting time to explore one of the other characters that we had, as he's now understanding that there was this technology that can stop time that's been stolen. They got to figure out what that means and how to combat that. Really interesting dynamics here, as the The one character is incredibly charming but incredibly brutal, and the other one is trying to figure out what is all happening here, and maybe he's our hero. I don't know. Time will tell on this one, but it's a completely compelling story with visuals that match fully. And with our next issue, let's talk Ultimate Spider-Man number 9, written by Jonathan Hickman with artwork by Marco Cocchetto. I love the way that Hickman is really balancing the A plot and the B plot within this issue, as we get to spend a lot of time with Peter and Harry, specifically with Otto Octavius, and then we also get to spend time with Ben and Jonah with Mary Jane Watson. Everything Cocchetto does with all of these characters, by the way, is absolutely stunning. There's a lot of talking head parts of this issue. There's not a lot of action. There's a little bit in there. The action is everything you would expect from a Cocchetto book, but the talking heads are still totally enticing. He draws wonderful characters. He really conveys emotion and action so well. Now, when it comes to those A and B plots, I think that Jonathan Hickman is having a lot of fun, and you only get to say that so often. He's kind of got grand ideas and notions, and he plays with a lot of things. But this, we're just kind of in the heads, and we're kind of like dealing with what these characters are thinking and saying to one another. Specifically, there's a section in this book where Peter, the person, gets to talk to Peter, the AI within the suit, and it's really fantastic. I love the back and forth that he has with himself as he's deciding whether or not to hand over the suit to Otto Octavius to kind of tinker with and toy with, as they have different plans on how they're going to approach the fact that Stark kind of has control over their suits. Really wonderful things. It's kind of, like I said, it's fun to see Jonathan Hickman have fun. So I'm really there for that part of it. Overall, it was an effective issue here. I'm just excited to kind of see where this can go, as it almost seems disconnected from the other Ultimate books here, which isn't wholly bad, but I'm ready for it to kind of all maybe come together, and it feels like we're getting closer and closer to that point. Next up, let's talk Uncanny X-Men number 3, written by Gail Simone with artwork by David Marquez. Mike Carey proved it, and Gail Simone continues to carry the torch. Rogue should be a leader of the X-Men team through and through, and this issue proves it, full stop. I love that Gail Simone is kind of leaning on Rogue as a character, and it's not that a team is needed, it's that young mutants need a leader, and she's there to step up, to train them, and to help them grow, and to make sure that they're safe. Not because she's an X-Man, not because she's a mutant, but it's just built into her moral background. I love seeing that. The narration and the dialogue choices that Gail makes here just feel so natural, and they flow so well. You get lost in the pages. It's like having a conversation with friends, or being a fly on the wall of a true conversation, as opposed to finding out this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's not like that at all. Those things do happen. We do follow a storyline. It just happens so naturally that you get lost within it. David Marquez is doing really fantastic work here, and I'm so encouraged to see him draw comics more often now that we're getting to see him month over month. I didn't get to see a lot of his work with DC, but prior to that, I feel like the last thing that we really got from him long standing was The Defenders, when Brian Michael Bendis was still at Marvel. That was a while ago, so it's great seeing him on artwork again. However, when we see some of the shortcuts that are taken artistically, specifically with backgrounds that get reused over and over and over, it's kind of like that old animation trick where you have a cartoon character running and you see the same background over and over. You know, it's kind of telling. We can notice it pretty quickly here, so it doesn't draw you fully out of the story, but I did see it. I did notice it. So overall, Uncanny X-Men, as far as the team books of the relaunch of X-Men, has probably been the most effective, and it might truly be the one that I stick around with the longest. All right, let's talk Universal Monsters Frankenstein number 2, written and drawn by Michael Walsh. This series has totally blown me away, as I didn't really know what to expect when we got into this, but I knew that I loved Michael Walsh's work within the Silver Coin, and this has totally blown me away. I feel like we're being told a heartfelt, tragic, and yet brutal story of all of these characters, and it's a story that we should know so well, but it's being told through the eyes of this child, and it's totally making you reconceptualize what you do know about Frankenstein the doctor, the monster, all of the ancillary characters within this story. And it's making it even more tragic than what it already was previously. Michael Walsh is not leaning on heavy narration here, as he's working within the confines of what has already happened in the movie, which is going to be difficult enough as it is. But he's doing so in such a masterful way, as the way that he's composing pages is just really stunning. There's a page in particular where he's holding up the brain that is being used for the monster, and it's perfectly lined up with the head of the doctor himself. It's really great visual storytelling. On top of that, being that the boy who we're kind of watching these events play out through his eyes, his father's arm is being used on the monster himself. So we're seeing that he longs for his father. He longs for that parent that he is missing now. And he's watching this monstrous being come to life and live this torturous life and be brutalized by some of these characters. And you can kind of see just the heartbreak and feel it so much more than we even did, knowing just what the monster had to deal with and go through. So again, it's incredibly effective. It's incredibly enjoyable. And the fact that he's doing so within the confines of a story that we know makes it even more worthwhile and even more noteworthy for a person like Michael Walsh. All right, let's talk Venom War Daredevil, #1, written by Chris Condon with artwork by Lance Medina. If there was a most surprising issue banner that I had for this channel, this would fit the bill. I was completely stunned by this issue. And in fact, I kind of don't like tie-ins and I don't like one-shots all that much. But when I have my favorite character in Daredevil and one of my favorite current writers in Chris Condon paired up together, I had to kind of dive in and see what was going on. And I was extraordinarily pleasantly surprised. Chris Condon shows that either A, he has a love for the character of Daredevil, or B, he at least has an incredible working foundation of the knowledge behind what it means to be Daredevil the character, both Elektra Daredevil and Matt Murdock Daredevil. The artwork by Lance Medina here was really kind of evoking feelings of like both Ramita Sr. and Jr. in a kind of a funny way here. It was definitely more of a comic booky approach than a book that I talked about previously, Daredevil, the Woman Without Fear, where that was gritty and kind of in the vein of Alex Maleev and Michael Lark. This is the comic booky version. And weighing them back and forth, I kind of liked the fact that we got a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. Chris Condon, I've enjoyed his work through and through, as he's been the writer of books like That Texas Blood and the Einfeld Gang Massacre, and seeing him work within the realm of superheroes now, specifically with such a crime-fueled character like Daredevil, I feel like it's just a match made in heaven. And again, just like I talked about with the other Daredevil issue this week, again, this was better than the ongoing. Marvel, take notice. Maybe Chris Condon's your guy for Daredevil. I don't know. Either way, this was a really effective issue here. As a tie-in, I didn't really care for it. As a standalone issue of Daredevil, it was pretty darn effective. Next up, let's talk Wolverine Revenge #2, written by Jonathan Hickman with artwork by Greg Capullo. This is a tough issue to really review, as I feel like the concept of this storyline is sound, and the reasoning for this series to exist is sound. But I feel like we're playing the wrong song at the wrong time, basically. Jonathan Hickman is kind of in the camp of let Greg cook, right? This is a story that's crafted just to let Greg go wild and do his artistic thing with a character like Wolverine. And I get that, and that's a lot of fun. But when you have a name like Jonathan Hickman on a book, you also have expectations, right? It's almost like a double-edged sword. When you put his name on a book, you can expect some money behind it, right? Because his name draws dollars. But his name also draws an expectation where there's weighty ideas and there's this grand scope and a vision behind what's happening. And we don't really get that here. We get the concept, but we don't get to play with that concept outside of the fact that, yeah, this big thing happened with an EMP kind of destroying the world, but that's kind of just the place setting. It's not truly the storyline, as it's just a Wolverine revenge story. And let's be honest, I love seeing Wolverine fight Sabretooth. It's a lot of fun, but we've also gotten it like 100 times, probably within the last year and a half. So like, is it exciting? No, not really. When Greg Capullo is drawing it, it makes it more exciting, but it's not up to the level of the expectation that I had in my head for this series. So overall, it was a bit of a letdown here. But again, when you have Greg Capullo drawing at Marvel, like it's hard not to be along for the ride. And with our runner-up pick of the week, let's talk Zatanna, Bring Down the House, number 4, written by Mariko Tamaki with artwork by Javier Rodriguez. Let's start with the artwork here. Javier Rodriguez is doing some of the best work that he's ever done. And I feel like I'm saying that issue over issue, but it's really true. The color choice that he has, since he's coloring his own work, are very colorful, very playful. They pop off the page, especially considering it's magical things that he's working with. You would expect that, but it's never anything that's over embellished or, God forbid, garish. And they play so well with the line weight and the choices that he's making when he's drawing and inking the figures on the pages here as well. Everything is just kind of working together so well. When it comes to the character of Zatanna, I really love the way that Mariko Tamaki has crafted this character in such a natural, real way. Nothing feels out of place, whether it's the dialogue that the characters are saying or just the overall character arc that she's on, as we've kind of gone through this mystery of what's happened with her, why she doesn't have magic, why maybe she doesn't want magic, and what the nature of her character, of her father's interactions with her as a child, what that meant for her as an adult now. Really fun stuff that we're playing with, really natural choices that are taking place here, and it makes it something that really draws you in and makes you kind of a player in the book itself here, as opposed to just a reader. I love what they're doing here. If there was a downside, not that this is a downside, but the character of John Constantine, when he's used in a book, I feel like people have an expectation of who that character is, myself included. He came off very charming and very heartwarming in this issue, almost to the point where I was just like, is that really John? Am I missing something? I don't know. I think we need to kind of see what his character motivations are a little bit more, as I've kind of been in the camp of John looks out for John. But, you know, we'll kind of find out about that. This is a Black Label book. Maybe this is a completely different John than what we knew previously. But overall, the combination of artwork and writing in this issue made it totally worthwhile for the runner-up pick. And with our top comic of the week, let's talk Helen of Windhorn, number 5, written by Tom King with artwork by Bilquis Evely. Man, we had so much fun talking about issue number 4, as we got to see Helen grow as a character, and we got to see her have motivation and have just wants and needs in her life. She finally had a drive and a vision for who she could be, and the joy of that issue led directly into issue number 5, which was totally heartbreaking and devastating, as she was on high and Helen was brought down low, as her grandfather is being maybe a little bit overbearing, as he's looking out for the safety of Helen herself, as she was injured when they went to this fantastical world. She held her own, but she almost didn't make it out, and he is not going to let her relive that reality and maybe come into a place where she will not make it out. This has led Helen to kind of fall way deep into the depression that we kind of met that character with in the very beginning, where she spends her days drinking, spends her nights locked up with the governess, yearning for something, but really just kind of being, quite frankly, a mope, right? Like, she just doesn't know what to do with her life and doesn't know that she needs something like this. The governess really finally had her place in this issue, where she was able to step up. And I think that both Tom King and Bilquis Evely crafted a beautiful scene together, as the governess unleashes on the grandfather, and it is a tongue lashing for the ages. And it all happens through the backdrop of the grandfather having to take down this enormous serpent, and he is swinging his sword and he is slashing, and the governess is doing the same exact thing with her words. And the combination of both of those things happening at the same time, and the governess not having a care for her own life, more so than conveying what she needs to say about the fact that Helen needs that fantasy world in her life, It was just majestical. It was something to truly behold. My fear with this is that we have one issue left and there is a lot to wrap up. Does this mean that maybe Helen of Windhorn will turn into a 6-issue series followed up by a 6-issue series? Time will tell on this, but overall, I can't wait to see what the finale looks like being issue number 6 and maybe what that means for the future of Helen moving forward. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you next week.